Hello and welcome to this user guide of the helicopter MRR5 Gnisir, which is a modular utility helicopter and container carrier. I'm going to show all of the basics and also go through a lot of the more in-depth stuff, as well as obviously showing you some of the modules and how they work. I've left timestamps in the video so you can just skip to whatever section you have questions about to keep it a little bit more simple. So we're just going to start by entering the cockpit. Let's get some lights on. So the first thing you're going to do is power up the cockpit systems with this key. Then we're going to just sit down in either one of the pilot seats, but then you also have to switch the pilot controls between each one of them. So to start up, we're just going to start with the navigation lights and the beacon lights. You can see that the navigation lights are now on. And then we're going to turn on the fuel valve, make sure that the engine kill switch is off, and then hold the engine starter compressor. So when the engine reaches 0.4 RPS, it's going to ignite. There we go, we have engine ignition. So we're just going to let this spool up, and then we're going to click the rotor clutch. So this clutch is going to slowly engage the rotor, and here we have the rotor RPS, and now you can see the rotor RPS is at full and the rotor clutch engaged indicator is on, which means the clutch is fully engaged. So that means we're all ready to take off. So the controls are pretty much like any helicopter in Stormworks. AED roll, WS for pitch, left right yaw, up down collective. So let's just start by pushing the collective up, and you can just pitch forwards. And we can take the landing gear up like this, and it's going to tilt forwards along the side of the helicopter. So one thing to notice is that even when you're pitching forwards, it's keeping its altitude perfectly, so you don't have to adjust the collective alongside it to keep the helicopter leveled. And also while rolling to the side, it's also going to yaw a little bit to the sides. So it's very easy and intuitive to use. And now we're going to go through all of the cockpit equipment. So first we have battery controls. You have the main battery charge and the reserve battery charge. You also have a switch to switch to reserve battery, like this. And that's in case the main battery has such a low charge that you can't start the engine. Then you can switch to reserve battery and start using that. Cockpit systems power key, of course, and then we have the main power switch located right here. The next thing we have is the enable nose wheel driving, because the nose wheel on the helicopter has a small electric motor, so you can steer it and drive the helicopter around as taxiing it. Let's just turn the landing gear brakes off, of course, and then you can drive the helicopter around just using WASD control. And this is not only because letting the helicopter taxi itself is very practical, but also because it's much easier to pick up containers or modules just landing the helicopter and reversing the helicopter over the container. It's much easier than flying right above the container and just aiming using your flying skills to pick it up. So let's turn the landing gear brakes on again and disable the driving. Then we have the navigation and beacon lights as I showed you. Then we have mute alarm sound and alarms display, because if there's an alarm going off, like a fire alarm, low fuel alarm or something like that, it's going to display on the main screen and make a sound. You can either mute the sound, or you can mute the message coming up on the screen, or you can mute both. either or. Next we have a lot of switches for different lights and stuff. First we have the cockpit lights white, and then cockpit lights red. Then we have the heater in the cockpit, and next thing we have the floodlights. So the floodlights are really strong, but they're really good and practical to use in nighttime, because it really just lights up the ground like daylight. Then we have a front spotlight on the nose of the helicopter. It doesn't have a dedicated landing light. That's because you can use either the front spotlight as a landing light or the floodlights. Last thing we have the exterior lights, which is just a couple of normal lights located around the helicopter, which is practical just to keep the helicopter lit up at night when parked. So then we have the illumination flares, because the helicopter has 6 illumination flares located on each side, well 3 on each side, and then just drop straight down to the ground and have a white light. Then we have the fuel probe. The fuel probe is tucked onto the side of the helicopter and rotates out and extends like this. So then it's going to extend something like 2 meters in front of the rotor blades. And when you click the extend probe button off again, then it's going to disconnect whatever is connected to the end of the fuel probe. The next button is the disable auto evasion, and that is because the helicopter has an auto evasion system. So at the front here we have a laser sensor, the laser distance sensor, and a speed sensor. So if the helicopter indicates that you're approaching a obstacle faster than you can evade it, then it's going to activate the auto evasion and just pull straight up and slow down your speed. And then you can of course just disable this function if it goes off too often or is preventing you from completing a specific task. The next thing is a pretty important thing, the container pickup mode, because that's going to extend the sidewalls of the helicopter like this, so it's easier to guide containers and modules in, and it's going to turn on a set of lasers located straight next to the electric connectors, which are going to hold a container or module in place. Next thing we have altitude holds, very normal altitude hold. Set an altitude, push the button, and it goes to that altitude. We have the autopilot, also pretty normal. Setting coordinates, enable it, and this will also turn itself off when you have reached the destination. Next thing we have the lift winch. We have the up and down and maggle signal. And that's because we have a winch right under here, and you can then either just use a normal rope and attach it to it, or you can use this, a maggle adapter. You just attach it to the winch, and then you can use the controls to lower or hoist up the winch and turn on the maggles. Last thing we have on the top panel here is just a normal activate emergency beacon. Just a normal emergency beacon signal. So now we're going to look at the screens, and starting by the radios. So the radios, you can just put in whatever channel you want between 0 and 100. And just use the push to talk button to activate it. But the pilots also has an internal communication systems, because if you look at the hotkeys, if you press 1, then you have PTT, like push to talk, pilot communication, and that's going to redirect the signal from the headsets to the other pilot, so you can communicate through the headsets like proper pilots. So next we have the remote control, because this helicopter has a remote control mode, but we're going to go back to that later. Then we have the main screen. So the main screen has on its first page a normal interactive map, which also will display your autopilot heading. Like if we just set a destination, put in the autopilot coordinates, and then it's going to show the distance and the heading required to get to that position. Like this. It's also going to display your GPS coordinates and your airspeed AS. And in the bottom right corner you have your current compass heading. If we go to page number 2, it has a radar. You have to turn on the radar like this. Use the plus and minus to adjust your radar range. Press R to reset it to its lowest range. On the third page we have a camera. This camera is located on the tail of the helicopter, and it's very useful to gain a visual on the underside of the helicopter and what's going on there, and also to help you guide in containers if you want to just stay in first person. Next we have a normal artificial horizon, and then we have a screen displaying your airspeed and your vertical speed and your altitude. So the airspeed and vertical speed, they're obviously both measured in knots. So both the pilot and co-pilot have these 3 screens in common. And the last screen I forgot to mention, the last page on the main screen, which is currently blank. That's because it's going to direct any video signal from a module into this. For example, the search and rescue module has a gimbal camera, and the video signal from that gimbal camera is directed to this page on the screen. So any module using a video signal is going to be displayed on this page of the screen. So then we have the 3 center screens. The first one is the engine control screen, which has the engine RPS, the current fuel measured in liters and percent, and also your calculated range. So this helicopter does have a range of roughly 1030 kilometers. Then we have a screen displaying your current pitch, roll, yaw, and the collective inputs for each of the coaxial rotors. This is the output being given by the gyro. And the last screen here is the rotor RPS. Next thing, we're going to take a look at the center console here. We've already looked at some of the things like fuel valve, starter, engine kill switch, rotor clutch, but we also have a rotor brake. So when you have stopped the engine and disabled the clutch, you can use the rotor brake to brake the speed on the rotor. Then we have a gauge showing you the engine throttle input, because the engine is obviously controlled by a PID, and this is going to show you how much throttle that PID is feeding to the engine. So it tells you something about how hard the engine is working. Then we have the switch pilot controls, like I showed you earlier. And then we have the landing gear brake and landing gear up button. Then we have the increase and decrease ducted fan speed, because this helicopter has a ducted fan on the tail to give an extra boost in speed. Many coaxial helicopters have a tail propeller, but this helicopter, which is going to pick up containers and have a lot of obstacles around the tail at many At many occasions it's not really safe to have a big spinning propeller, so ducted fan is not only there because it's more efficient in this case, but also because it's safer. So you can decrease and increase it with a scale from 0 to 10, and this basically just controls the clutch of the ducted fan. So you can turn it all the way off, take it down to 0. And the reason why you need this is because then you can very precisely adjust your speed, because when you're just pitching forwards, then you're just getting a full pitch forwards at all times. Also the autopilot is just pitching full forwards. But using this you can actually control the speed you want to have. So then we have the throttle lever, of course. And the thing about the throttle lever, it's not really deciding the throttle as directly as you might imagine on the engine. You're just going to increase it if you're lifting heavy. So you can see it as something that just adds to the basic throttle. As it says here, follow throttle to lift ratio list. And that's the list indicated up here. So if you're lifting something like a module, some of the modules I made have a mass of around 2500. And you can see here 2500 mass equals 2. That means you want to increase the throttle to 2 approximately. And every time you lift any kind of heavy cargo, heavy containers, you would have to adjust your throttle accordingly. It doesn't have to be completely precise, but it's recommended in order to keep stability, and it's also going to reduce some of your ducted fan speed by how much throttle you have. So more throttle is less ducted fan speed, and that has to do with the stability. So that's also why you don't want to have too much throttle. It's going to decrease your stability and also decrease your speed. Keep that in mind. More throttle means less speed, but more lifting power. At the top throttle, 10, you can lift 15,000 mass and more. I would not really recommend lifting more than 20,000 mass, as long as if you intend to go into horizontal flight. If you're just lifting a heavy object between two very short distances, then that's okay. You can lift up to 35,000 or 40,000 mass. So that's over 10 times the weight of the helicopter itself. Next thing, I'm just going to show you some of the equipment you find around the helicopter. You have a lot of equipment inside the cockpit. Everything from welding equipment to firefighting equipment, diving equipment even, and a lot of first aid equipment, everything. A lot of safety equipment and all. Also next to each of the pilot seats, you also have a set of equipment. Since this is a multi-role helicopter, it also needs a lot of equipment for any kind of purpose located not only in the modules which you attach to it, but also in the cockpit. To refuel the helicopter or connect to its battery, either to recharge the helicopter's battery or something else you want to charge using the helicopter, you can either use the electric cable connector here or the fluid hose connector here, or you can use these, which are the old type of connectors. You will have to enable this one, just to keep that in mind. So you have the option to just to use either the old or the new. So when it comes to repairs, this helicopter is designed so that you have access to all the essential equipment on the surface of the helicopter. So let's, for example, look at the engine itself. As you can see here, the engine is exposed, so you can just climb up on the top of the helicopter using this ladder, or you can just simply climb up on the nose like this and bring a welding torch and repair anything that is damaged. So all kinds of important equipment are always located on the surface. Like here we have the gearbox for the rotor, for example, and also back here we have the clutches and the gearbox for the ducted fan, all located on the surface, so you can easily reach it for repairs. So this helicopter can completely crash and burn down, and you can fix it back up. So I am now approaching the North Harbor to pick up a container. I'm first going to pick it up by not landing and just using the container pickup mode to just try and aim on the container and pick it up and show you some of the techniques you want to use. So we start by enabling the container pickup mode. Then we're going to aim for this container here. So the gyro on this helicopter is not very aggressive on the correcting, so you will have to keep in mind that as soon as you just give a little tap in any of the roll or pitch direction, the helicopter will glide in that direction for a while, so very small inputs. So you want to first just place your tail over the container, and then slowly and very carefully pitch your way backwards. And then when you have reached it all the way, just take your collective hold down, so you basically land on the container. Then you can turn off the container pickup mode. And then you're going to make sure that the top connectors on the container is on. And then you're going to open this key button and enable the container connectors like that. And there we have the container connected. Just lock the button again so you don't just accidentally push it and drop the entire container. And then we can just lift off. And this container has a mass of 2200, as you can see on the side. So that means, well, we want to take the throttle up to roughly 2. Then we can just fly off to the destination and deliver the container. So the last thing I'm going to show you is how to use the modules. I'm going to use the search and rescue module as an example. So you can either pick up the modules like you do with any containers, or much easier, you can just go into the editor like this, paste the module in, make sure that it doesn't collide with anything or and remove any components when you spawn it, when you paste it in. So just paste it in, and then you can spawn it. So when you spawn it, you obviously have to go and connect it now. So then we start by turning the key here, turning on the top connectors and our own container connectors. And then the module will connect. So this is how the search and rescue module looks inside. I'm going to show you a little bit of that very soon. But let's just start by getting into the air. So now we're going to take a look at the search and rescue module. So, one thing you're going to notice is that we have a electric connector at the center console here. And that is because most of the modules have this. This is a remote control which you need to place like a center console like this. Just turn it around and there we have it connected. And this now feeds all these controls back to the module. Let's turn on some lights. So in the module itself, all the modules are different and made for different purposes. There's a lot of modules I made myself, and also a lot of community-made modules with other kinds of purposes. And you can also make your own modules. On the workshop you will find a template module, which also has this controller with just empty buttons, so you can put whatever you want there and add whatever feature you want to have on your module. So this search and rescue module has a lot of first aid equipment, defibrillators, 2 medical beds, a lot of seating, and it also have 2 harnesses or winches, so you can control the winches and the hatch from the hinge, from either one of the harnesses or from this controller right here. It also has a water tank with a water cannon on it. I'm going to show you that soon. Also some other kind of equipment. So if you sit down in the pilot seat, now we have the controller, which can control a lot of things on the module. First thing, we have the water cannon. So it has a water tank of 700 liters, so you can press water cannon on, then we turn on water cannon, and you can control the water cannon from here. You can then switch over to your third screen to see from the rear view of the helicopter like this, or you can go over to the fourth page, and then we have the gimbal camera. So let's take the gimbal camera up like that. You can turn it to the sides, you can enable infrared mode, you can enable stabilizing, tracking and all that, zoom in and out. All the gimbal camera features are on this controller. Then we also have a hose to refill water to the water cannon's water tank. So you just lower that into the water, press the water fill pump, and it will suck up water and place it in the water tank. It also has emergency beacon locator, so if I, for example, turn on our own emergency beacon, it's going to detect our emergency beacon. So when you're finished with your module, or just placing it somewhere, remember to take the remote control back out, place it back into the module. You don't need to hang it up like this, just place it wherever, just make sure you don't lose it. And then you can go and connect to any other kind of module. So now I've gone through all the equipment and features of the helicopter, and I hope it helped in making the vehicle a little bit more easy to use. If you have any questions at all about how to use the helicopter, which is not specifically mentioned in the video, don't hesitate to ask in the comment sections of this video, or on the workshop page, or you can contact me on my Discord server as well. But if there's any questions which are clearly answered in this video, then I'm not going to respond. Like if you ask, how do I turn on the engine, how do I pick up a module, I'm not going to respond to that. I also stream on Twitch every Sunday at 1800 CET time, that's Central European time. There I do a lot of build projects, like I actually made this helicopter on those streams. So that's the kind of projects you can follow up on. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the helicopter.